The shouts carried across the wide stretch of Venice Beach, cutting through the usual buzz of skateboard wheels, seagull cries, and the endless chatter of sunseekers. A woman sat sprawled on the hot sand, her market tote torn open, its contents scattered and bruised. Around her stood three young men, laughing cruelly as they brushed sand from their designer sneakers, ignorant of the shadow falling across them. A figure moving with quiet certainty, muscles coiled beneath a plain gray hoodie. They had no idea the man walking toward them was Sylvester Stallone, and they had just made the biggest mistake of their young lives. Only moments before, the morning had been perfect. The California sun shimmered high over Venice Beach, casting a brilliant glow over the bustling boardwalk and the endless stretch of sand. Jennifer Flavin, a middle-aged woman who had managed to maintain her slender figure, spent part of her morning strolling through the small seaside farmers market. Her tote bag, old but sturdy, was filled with treasures: a bouquet of sunflowers, some rustic sourdough bred from a local bakery, and a paper bag brimming with ripe white peaches, their fragrance wrapping around her, like a memory of long sun-soaked summers past. Across the stretch of sand, Sly watched her intently. His world was Jennifer, and in that golden moment, nothing else mattered. But peace is always fragile. An old black pickup truck skidded into a no-parking zone by the curb, its blaring music shattering the morning calm. Three young men jumped out, brimming with the reckless arrogance so common in public spaces. Tattoos ran down their arms, and oversized sunglasses perched on their noses, despite the morning light. They shoved each other, laughing too loudly, swaggering toward the vendors with the casual disrespect of men who believed themselves untouchable. The leader, a wiry man with a buzz cut and a tank top that screamed "alpha male" louder than any words could, spotted Jennifer gathering her goods near a folding table. "Hey, lady!" he shouted, striding forward, his friends following like hyenas, sensing easy prey. "Need help carrying those? Might hurt your back." The others snickered as they closed in. Jennifer's spine stiffened. She gripped her tote tighter, offering a polite smile, trying to sidestep them without causing a scene. After decades beside Sly, she knew the value of de-escalation. But today, the tide was against her. The wiry man cut her off, grabbing the tote's strap and giving it a playful tug, causing peaches to spill onto the sand. Jennifer gasped, bending to pick them up, but the second man, stocky and draped in thick gold chains, deliberately bumped her with his shoulder, knocking her off balance. Her knees hit the hot sand with a jolt of pain through her joints. The tote tore open completely, bread and flowers scattering like fallen flags across the ground. Laughter erupted, harsh, cruel, and unkind. Someone nearby chuckled nervously. Another looked away, pretending not to see. Phones were raised, not to call for help, but to record. At that moment, Sylvester Stallone moved. He set his coffee cup carefully onto the hood of the car, rolled his shoulders once to loosen old muscles, and began crossing the sand. He wasn't fast. He didn't need to be. The way he moved, deliberate, steady, unstoppable, sent an invisible ripple through the crowd. Heads turned instinctively. The three young men didn't notice. They were too busy taunting Jennifer, tossing her crushed sunflowers between them like a cruel game. Jennifer rose, brushing sand from her dress, and her eyes locked onto Sly's across the lot. A flicker of relief crossed her face, but also a warning. She didn't want him hurt. He gave her the slightest nod, a promise. "It's all right. I'm all right. The wiry leader, emboldened by the growing circle of spectators, swaggered toward Jennifer, lifting one of the bruised peaches and tossing it carelessly from hand to hand. "What's the matter, ma'am? Farmer's market too rough for you," he sneered. His buddy mimicked an old woman hobbling on a cane, drawing fresh laughter from the small crowd. Jennifer said nothing. Her pride, battered but intact, remained her shield. "Pick it up!" a deep voice rang out. The words sliced through the laughter like a blade. Slow, measured, deadly. The leader turned, squinting against the sun. His eyes fell on Sylvester Stallone, standing a few feet away, hands relaxed at his sides, his expression unreadable. For a heartbeat, silence cloaked the beach. Then the leader snorted, puffing his chest. "What's this? Grandpa here to save the day?" he jeered. "Better back off before you break a hip, old man." Sly's gaze didn't waver. He tilted his head slightly, like a man sizing up a heavy bag before throwing the first punch. "Pick it up," he repeated, his voice calm but weighted with the authority of someone who had spent a lifetime mastering violence, and mastering the choice not to use it unless absolutely necessary. The second man, the heavy one, stepped forward, arms spread in mock challenge. "What are you gonna do, huh? Call your grandkids?" Sly didn't blink, didn't move, but the air around him thickened, charged with the kind of tension that precedes a gathering storm. "Last chance," he said. The wiry leader laughed and whipped the peach toward Sly's chest. It struck with a dull thud and dropped at his feet. The decision had been made. Sylvester Stallone took a slow breath, the kind that steadied a fighter before stepping into the ring. Without any rush, he bent down, picked up the bruised peach at his feet, and placed it gently on Jennifer's tote. His movements were precise, almost reverent. Then he straightened, locking his gaze onto the wiry young man who still stood there smirking. The bystanders sensed it now. The tension had shifted. This wasn't just an old man standing his ground. This was a man who carried the weight of battles, won long before these boys were born. The wiry leader, still oblivious to the danger, took a step forward, puffing himself up, ready to shove the old guy out of the way. His hand reached out, fingers aiming to push Sly's chest. But it never landed. In one impossibly smooth movement, Stallone pivoted his weight, stepping slightly to the side. His hand snapped up, intercepting the boy's wrist mid-air, with a grip like iron. Before the bully could react, Sly twisted lightly, just enough to send the kid sprawling face first into the sand, knocking the sunglasses clean off his head. There was no brutality in the move, only efficiency. The second man, the burly one, cursed loudly and lunged. He swung a wild, clumsy punch, relying more on weight than skill. Sly leaned back just enough to let the fist pass by harmlessly, then delivered a short, sharp elbow to the man's ribs. The sound of air escaping his lungs was loud enough to make a few spectators gasp. He staggered backward, clutching his side, eyes wide with disbelief. The third young man, lanky and wiry with nervous energy, hesitated. He wasn't sure anymore if this was a fight he wanted to finish. His instincts screamed at him to run, but pride held him frozen in place. Sly turned to face him fully, his posture loose but ready. The crowd watched, holding their breath, as if witnessing a lesson being carved into stone. "You sure you want to be part of this?" Stallone asked, voice low but carrying across the sand. For a moment, the only sounds were the waves crashing in the distance and the muffled cries of seagulls overhead. The lanky kid glanced at his friends, one on the ground groaning, the other stumbling to his feet, and made a decision. He turned and ran, pushing past the stunned onlookers, not daring to look back. The leader, face red and streaked with sand, scrambled upright, furious now, more at the humiliation than any real injury. He charged, fists swinging wildly in a blind rage. Sly didn't move until the last possible second. He sidestepped, caught the boy's arm, and used his momentum to flip him neatly over his shoulder. The young man landed with a heavy thud, a puff of sand exploding around him. For a few seconds, there was only the ragged breathing of the defeated and the hushed murmurs of the growing crowd. Stallone stood there, calm, composed, dusting the sand from his palms as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Jennifer, who had watched everything with a mix of awe and concern, moved to his side, touching his arm lightly. "Sly, your shoulder," she whispered, noticing the slight stiffness he carried. The inevitable cost of age, even in a body as battle-hardened as his. He gave her a reassuring smile, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and shook his head. "I'm all right," he said, voice gentle, as if she were the only person in the world that mattered. Slowly, the bystanders began to stir. Murmurs grew louder. People were pulling out their phones, replaying the scene in their minds, realizing they had just witnessed something incredible. Not a flashy fight for likes and views. No unnecessary violence. Just a man protecting what he loved with unwavering control and precision. An older man, with the weathered face of a lifelong surfer, muttered under his breath, "That's Rocky Balboa, man. That's Rambo." A woman near the taco stand clutched her heart and whispered to her husband, "He moved like he was 30. Someone clapped softly, then another and another. Soon, the scattered applause rolled into a full wave of respect. Not the raucous cheer of a sports event, but the solemn, grateful clapping reserved for heroes who never ask for recognition, but receive it anyway. Sylvester Stallone said nothing. He simply helped Jennifer gather her scattered goods, careful to brush the sand from the bread, to rescue the slightly bruised peaches, to arrange the sunflowers back into some semblance of order. It wasn't pride that filled his chest as he moved. It was something deeper, something stronger. A reminder of why he had fought so many battles in his life. Not for fame, not for fortune, but for moments like this. Moments where strength wasn't shown by the force of a punch, but by the dignity of a simple gesture, a defense of something precious. As they finished gathering their things, the young leader sat up slowly, spitting sand from his mouth, cradling his wrist, rage and shame warring across his face. Who the hell are you?" he croaked. Sly met his eyes, his own gaze steady and devoid of any triumph or malice. Only a quiet, undeniable authority. "Just a husband," he said, voice rough like gravel but soft as a promise. "Who doesn't let punks like you push around what matters most." Jennifer slid her hand into his without hesitation. They turned together, walking across the sand back toward their Suburban. The crowd parted silently to let them through, a few people nodding in quiet admiration, others whispering to one another, their phones forgotten, their hearts stirred. The morning sun warmed their backs, and in the distance, the ocean glinted like a field of diamonds. Sylvester squeezed Jennifer's hand gently, the calluses of a fighter brushing against the softness of a lifetime partner. She looked up at him, eyes shining with unshed tears, not from fear, but from pride. He smiled down at her, that same lopsided, rugged smile that had once lit up movie screens across America, but that had always belonged to her, and her alone. "I got your peaches," he said lightly, lifting the battered bag as if it were the most precious cargo in the world. Jennifer chuckled, wiping her eyes. "And my hero," she whispered. Behind them, the bullies sat in the sand, nursing their bruised egos and battered bodies, watched by a growing circle of witnesses who would remember this Saturday morning long after the sand had washed clean and the sun had set. Some would tell the story with awe, some with disbelief, and by evening, the videos would no doubt flood the internet. But for Sylvester Stallone, it didn't matter. He hadn't done it for the cameras or the claps. He had done it for the woman who had been by his side for 50 years, through battles far harder than this one. And as they reached their car, and he opened the door for her like he had 1,000 times before, he knew he would do it again, 1,000 times more if she needed him. Because some fights were worth every bruise, every scar, every cost, and some loves deserved nothing less. The drive home wound leisurely up the Pacific Coast Highway, the ocean stretching endlessly to the left, waves glittering like scattered diamonds beneath the mid-morning sun. Sylvester Stallone kept one hand lightly resting on the wheel, the other loosely intertwined with Jennifer's on the center console. Neither spoke for a while. Words felt unnecessary, almost clumsy, after the quiet intensity of what had just happened. Instead, they simply existed together in the warm silence, the years between them speaking louder than any conversation could. Jennifer traced slow circles over the back of his hand with her thumb, a small, absent-minded gesture that reached deeper than any grand declaration. Every few minutes, Sly would glance sideways at her, checking without making it obvious, reading the lines of her face for any sign of lingering fear or hurt. But Jennifer was herself, steady, composed, stronger than she had any right to be after what had just unfolded on the beach. It wasn't just the bruises that mattered to her. It was the knowing that he had been there, the unspoken reassurance that after all this time, after all the fame and noise and distance life sometimes tried to wedge between two people, they were still a team. The bag of peaches sat safely tucked behind Jennifer's feet. The flowers, though a little wilted, still vibrant enough to bring a smile when she glanced down at them. A few petals had fallen onto the floor mat, and Sylvester made a mental note to shake them out later. Just one of those little things he liked to do because she would notice, even if she never said a word. Venice Beach faded behind them, replaced by the slow rise of Malibu's cliffs and the scrubby brush that lined the coastal highway. As they passed Point Doom, Jennifer finally broke the silence. "You know," she said quietly, a teasing lilt to her voice, "you're going to be all over the internet again." Sly chuckled under his breath, a low, warm sound that vibrated in his chest. "Let them talk," he said simply. "I wasn't fighting for cameras. I was fighting for you." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "I know." Her voice caught just slightly, the emotion too thick to hide. She cleared her throat and turned to look out the window, pretending to admire the coastline. But Sly saw the glisten in her eyes and felt his own throat tighten in response. It was strange, he thought, how life worked, how the biggest victories weren't the ones with trophies or flashing lights, but the quiet ones, the ones fought in parking lots or living rooms or hospital waiting rooms, the ones no one ever wrote songs about, but that mattered far more than any headline. He pulled the Suburban into their driveway, a modest ranch-style house nestled into the hills above Malibu, far from the glare of Hollywood, just the way they liked it. The bougainvillea had exploded into a riot of color across the front porch, and Jennifer's beloved rose bushes lined the walk with a stubborn, cheerful defiance against the salty coastal winds. Sly parked, cut the engine, and for a moment neither of them moved, savoring the quiet stillness of being home. Finally, he turned to her with a wry smile. "Come on," he said. "Let's rescue what's left of those peaches before they decide to ferment." She laughed, a true laugh this time, and together they climbed out, gathering their battered treasures. Inside, the house smelled faintly of cinnamon and old wood. Photos lined the walls, not of movie premieres or magazine covers, but of family gatherings, lazy Sunday mornings, grandkids' birthday parties, backyard barbecues. Their life, captured in snapshots of unguarded, imperfect, beautiful moments. Sly set the peaches carefully into a bowl on the kitchen counter, while Jennifer filled a vase with water for the flowers, tenderly arranging them despite the broken stems. She hummed under her breath, a tune so familiar he couldn't place it, but that stirred something warm and aching in his chest. Watching her, Stallone felt the years fall away. She was the same girl he had chased across a film set in New York, the same woman who had stood by him through the long nights of doubt and the dizzying highs of success. He stepped closer, brushed a strand of silver hair behind her ear, and pressed a kiss to her temple. She leaned into him instinctively, her hands still busy with the flowers, their bodies fitting together with the ease of long practice. After a moment, she spoke again, her voice quieter now. "You scared me today, Sly." He pulled back just enough to see her face. "I know," he said. "I'm sorry. I didn't want to. But I couldn't stand there and do nothing." She nodded, her fingers lightly tracing the seam of his sweatshirt. "I know you didn't have a choice. I just—" She shook her head, the words trailing off. He caught her chin gently, tilting her face up to his. "Hey, I'm here. I'm okay. You're okay. That's all that matters." She blinked rapidly, then smiled, a little watery, but genuine. "You're still my hero, you know," she said, "even if it takes a few more days to get over a fight than it used to." He laughed, a full-bodied rumbling sound that filled the kitchen. "Yeah, well, nobody told me the recovery time gets longer when you hit 78. She grinned, swatting his arm lightly. "You still move better than half the kids on that beach." "Maybe," he said, mock modest, "but I bet they'll think twice before they mess with someone else's wife next time." Her laughter faded into a look of pure affection, the kind that only decades could build, and he felt it settle deep into his bones. The unshakable truth that all the fame, the movies, the glory, were just chapters. This, her, them now, was the real story. The afternoon slipped by softly. They made sandwiches with the salvaged bread, ate peaches over the sink while the juice ran down their wrists, and listened to the faint hum of the ocean beyond the hills. At one point, Sly checked his phone and found it blowing up with messages. Friends, old colleagues, even a few journalists who had somehow already gotten wind of the morning's events. A video had surfaced, grainy but unmistakable. A silver-haired man dismantling 3 young punks with the efficiency of a seasoned warrior. Sly shook his head and set the phone face down on the counter. It didn't matter. Let the world talk. Let them spin stories. The truth was simpler and far more important. That night, long after the sun dipped below the horizon and the stars stitched silver across the velvet sky. Sylvester and Jennifer sat on their back porch, wrapped in a thick old quilt, listening to the soft chirr of crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl in the hills. Jennifer rested her head against his shoulder, and he kissed the crown of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the solid comfort of her beside him. He thought about the boys from the beach, about how easy it had been to forget, in their youth and arrogance, that real strength didn't come from bravado or noise. It came from knowing what mattered enough to fight for it, and what mattered enough to walk away. Jennifer shifted slightly, snuggling closer. "You know," she said, voice sleepy, "I don't care if it's all over the internet. I'm proud of you." He smiled, running his hand slowly up and down her arm. "I'm proud of you, Joe. Always have been." She hummed softly, and the sound was pure contentment. He watched the stars blink above them and thought about the life they had built. Imperfect, messy, beautiful beyond measure. In the end, the fights, the fame, the fortune, they were just ripples in a much bigger sea. What mattered was here, wrapped in a shared quilt under a night sky, hands entwined, hearts steady. Sylvester Stallone closed his eyes, breathed deep the sweet California air, and knew with a certainty deeper than any applause or headline, this was his greatest victory.